welcome back to another episode of Snap Publishing, where we discuss the secrets of Edward Leeds Gallman's Coral Castle and how it pertains to the biblical narrative and the modern periodic table and the zodiac and DNA. Okay, you're gonna kind of do something different today. I want to get into a couple of good books. This one right here, War of Art, and this one, The Writer's Journey. Chris Vogel, Stephen Pressfield. Pressfield will get you off your ass if you're on the fence about writing a book. It's a very motivating story right there. The other book, Mr. Vogel, I believe it's Vogel, right? Vogler, I'm sorry, Mr. Vogler. It's called The Hero's Journey. And it's before you can get a script in Hollywood, you have to follow the format in that book. And you say, well, why are you bringing these things up? Well, every single storyline that's worth a damn is found in the periodic table. The periodic table is the hero's journey. I'm going to express this 10,000 different ways. I'm saying the same thing over and over and over, different ways. But the Matrix, in my opinion, I want to do a little disclaimer saying this is all my opinion. I can't state it as fact. So I'm going to give you an FYI that this is, in my opinion, according to my work, which is based in Edward Leeds Gallman's Coral Castle, mirror imaged, the periodic table, mirror imaged, and things we've discussed in previous videos. But in my personal interpretation, the essence or main focus of the Matrix means womb, by the way. It's not so much as that it's a computer simulation or stimulation. It's as much as it is about the writer's discourse on the human condition itself. So the machines in that movie cannot be just machines. They have to represent something else. And they allude to it several times throughout the theme of the movie. And like I say, there are a couple disclaimers here. Where the little baby's getting fed liquefied human remains. That taps into a lot of controversial subject matter. And that subject matter comes up in many movies. Okay? I won't get into those different movies, but it gets into adrenochrome and extracting that from humans. And that has come up in a couple of science fiction movies from the 1970s. A Johnny Depp movie with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But anyway, I'm going to push past that for now. The thing that represents us feeding ourselves to ourself, that's like a world ideology or economic system that causes wars, famines, pandemics, economic global collapse. That's like the cycle of life and death. And not so much the AI versus man. And we'll get into that in a minute. But it's basically a movie about we have found the enemy and it is us. The Matrix, in my opinion, is not about a computer simulation. It's about what makes humans tick and the fact that it's the original Matrix, according to Mr. Smith when he was torturing Morpheus. He said the first version was perfect, but you people rejected it, and we lost a whole crop of humans. That's not the first movie to use the term crops for humans. If you follow Jupiter Ascending, very good movie. But that talks about humans in the form of being bred for the purpose of, it's a crop. But that's actually a biblical theme. Because in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it's called the harvest. Okay, so this is not a science fiction thing. It's actually something that is covered in the Bible. Humans being harvested like wheat. So the first version of the Matrix failed because it was too perfect. And that taps into the storyline of the fall of Lucifer. And there's a little Luciferian doctrine, another FYI, another listener beware. This is in my opinion. The Luciferians are slipping their doctrines into the Matrix movie storyline. But this whole thing goes back to the Garden of Need, or what we call Eden. If you take the letters of the word Eden, it spells need. And the Garden of Need, as I've said in other videos, is your groin and your stomach and your neediness. Okay, it's always your base functions. It's never your holy of holies, your higher functions. Okay, so this first pre-Matrix, we'll call it, Mr. Smith taps into with the torture of Morpheus. This gets into that system that was people tending to their own business, people watching their own garden, as opposed to today's system where everyone else is minding other people's business. And I get into Song of Solomon, the book of Song of Songs in the Bible. It says, others' fields I have kept, but my own I have not kept. And it's the lament. The Song of Songs is stuck on stupid, right? It's an SOS, right? It's binary code. One long, three long, three short, three long, three short. Technically, it's one long and one short, but it's done 3 different times. So it's technically a binary code. An SOS is actually the S twice. So you got S and O. So the first binary system was the battle of God versus the devil. Then it became Adam versus Eve. And that's turned into what we call Morse code. Today we call it binary code, 1 and 0. So I've already covered that in previous episodes. I don't want to get into it. But this first system, according to the biblical narrative, was the fall of Lucifer and also the fall of Adam and Eve. Okay? And when the two actually occurred, if you follow the Bible narrative, it's very murky when Adam and Eve fell in relation to when Lucifer fell. So a lot of people like to blend it and blur it. The purists of the Bible say Lucifer happened way before Adam and Eve. God was redoing things. The creation in Genesis is the recreation. The world had been destroyed because of the fall of Lucifer. So that was the reorganization of the solar system into what we know as today. But back when Lucifer was running the show, the 3 pyramid complex was the perfect system that went south. And that was based on, if you follow the biblical narrative, Abraham was given a sacrifice to replace his son that he was about to sacrifice. He was about to sacrifice Isaac. And God gave him a ram with his head caught in the bush or the thicket. So, but it's a patriarchal system. That's why it's called a ram with his head caught in the bush. Later on, Moses corrects this system with the creation of the tabernacle. Okay, and the tabernacle represents a vagina. Okay, so one is a patriarchal system, the other is a matriarchal system, and those two were later changed into the Temple of Solomon, which is a blending of both. This is a type of where God said, or Adam actually said it, a man will cleave unto his wife, and those two will become one. In other words, their genetics will blend. So the child that's created will have part of its mother and part of its father. Okay, so that Temple of Solomon is the uniting of the two. So I don't want to get off on a tangent about that, but that was back when people in that golden age, as we'll call it, okay, the Nebuchadnezzar's dream version of the metal man image. That was when Lucifer was running the show, okay? And things were considered, oh, they're perfect. Nothing was ever perfect. But we'll just, for argument's sake, we'll say back then was considered the golden age. Today we live in a brass or the brass age where the head of gold is actually copper and zinc, and it appears to be gold. But anyway, we've already covered that in a previous episode. A couple of very interesting things. One, Morpheus talking to Neo when they both go into the construct, and he's explaining things to Neo, and he says, "The matrix is the wool that's been pulled over your eyes. It's there with you when you're in church and when you pay your taxes." Pay attention to that statement, because what Morpheus is saying is this new system that came along to replace this old spiritual system where people tended to their own business. Back in the day, people were minding their own fields and growing their own crops. And today, all our jobs, we have to tend to other people's fields. Okay, back then it was a religious system. Okay, today it's a mishmash. It's well, the socialists today say, "Oh, we're the pure system. We're not religious." They're religious. They're the most religious, as a matter of fact. They make church people look like a walk in the park, but they deny it. They live in a delusion. They self-delude themselves. But you have a socialist system, and then you have a capitalist system. Okay, and that is occurring both at the same time. That's why Jesus said, "I'm going to raise the weeds with the tares," or the tares with the wheat. In other words, the weeds are going to grow up among the wheat stalks. The weeds and the wheat are growing together. So these two systems, the two economic systems, are going to just constantly clash. So that's where we find ourselves today. And people run around saying, "Oh, it's a patriarchy. It's a patriarchy." It's not a patriarchy. It's not. It isn't. But people like to live in their own world. So Morpheus's statement that it's there with you when you go to church. Now, what you consider church, what one person considers church, is different than what another person does. The church today for these socialists, these communists, is college. When you go to these colleges, they're indoctrinating you. That's your church. That's your religious political system. And you base your economics in that structure. And then you have the people on the right, very conservative. They actually attend Christian, Hebrew, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, all the world church organizations, plus the economic systems that those hitch their wagon to, which is usually a 9 out of 10 times it's a capitalist system. So what Morpheus is saying, it's there with you when you go to church and when you pay your taxes. Pay attention when he says that. Pay your taxes. Like Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. We talked about in Exodus 3:2, the tabernacle being essentially, it's a vagina. Like when God appeared to Moses in Exodus 3:2, it says he appeared in a bush that was it was a fire in the bush, or the bush was on fire, but it was not consumed. That's a vagina, people. It's a vagina that's not out of control. It's not a 911 conflagration. It's a woman who's got her life in order, her priorities straight, and she's not focused on that part of her body being the source of income. Okay, she's using her brain, not her brawn, because that's where your strength lies, right there. So that is what that's saying. Same thing with the ram with the head caught in the thicket, or that's saying a man who has to sacrifice that part of his body to produce offspring and to propagate the species. It's not talking about the lower function organs in a negative way. Okay, so you got to focus on that, because the left has turned this into a complete circus, and they've gone down this road of they've taken these basic teaching points from the Bible and the Vedic text and turned it into black tantric BS. And I'll just leave it at that, because you can take these things and you can turn them evil. That's what black tantric systems are. They take these holy things that were meant for the propagation of the species, and they turn it into just lust, just living any way you want, and just diving into the dark side. It's what it is. It's what Star Wars, in my opinion, what Star Wars movie theme. That's what the dark side is. You're using your black tantric system as opposed to living for family and godliness and God and country. But anyway, you'll notice when Morpheus starts talking about, hang on a sec, was it Morpheus or Mr. Smith? It talks about, one of them talks about the first Neo who gained control of the Matrix. He was born in the Matrix. He wasn't born in Zion. And he had full control of his capacity to control the system. And he makes this guy out to be a nice guy. That, in my opinion, a little bit of warning here, I believe it was Morpheus who presented it in such a way. That's the Luciferian doctrine. Trying to say, oh, Lucifer was this light bringer. No. If you read the biblical account, Lucifer fell. Okay? And by the way, that first Neo is Adam. Okay? And that first Adam sold us and his wife, Eve. Adam and Eve sold us back into slavery and handed everything back to Lucifer, who was now Satan. That's the true storyline. Okay? So this movie is gently pushing you into this direction that they're trying to move you into. Hey, Lucifer's a nice guy. No, he ain't. And by the way, the first Neo was Adam. Okay, and that first Adam sold us into slavery. So you have to realize when they slip these things into these movies, that is what they're doing. And I'm setting the record straight. Okay, so theme throughout the whole movie, and that's the digital rain. And it's always green screen, but every once in a while you see the drips on the bottom, they're blue-green. That is a biblical concept, and that is when Cain killed Abel, that's Adam and Eve's first two offspring. Okay, that is essentially one color killing the other, one side of the color spectrum dominating the other side of the spectrum, the one killing the zero. So when everything went south in Adam's family, they had to try for another son to replace Abel, who Cain killed. And his name was Seth. Seth represents blue-green light because Adam is Adamo, which means red. Eve is evening, evaporate, UV. Okay? If you look at the word ewe-lamb, that's a UV lamb. Trust me, that's what it is. Eve, and that's why you look at these temples, these drawings of Shiva, sometimes Kali, they're blue. It's because they're ultraviolet. They're on that end of the spectrum. So daddy's over here, mommy's over here. Blue-green is somewhere in the middle, okay? And you'll also find white in there too. So, and white can be tricky. So this whole blue-green thing comes up a lot in the biblical narrative, and it reveals itself in the Matrix storyline as well. And I'll get into the screens that Cypher at Cypher's workstation when Neo sneaks up on him, what all those monitors represent. And this is a graphic right here of the basics on that, but we'll get to that in a minute. So in the biblical narrative, this blue-green, okay, which represents life on Earth. And in medieval Europe, it's the green man. He's usually looking out through a bush. Jethro Tull has a song, Cup of Wonder, from Songs from the Wood. And in that song, Cup of Wonder, he mentions the green man. Ask the green man where he comes from. He covers a couple of interesting things in that song because they tell you, oh, nobody knows what the ley lines in Europe were. Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson, he talks about the the lines of silver and of gold. That's the lines that the sun and the moon make crisscrossing each other, the crisscross pattern. So all these experts are like, yeah, we don't know what ley lines are, and it's right in a song that Jethro Tull. But anyway, I digress. And that is also, in my opinion, I can't speak for Ian Anderson, but that is in my opinion. Okay. So blue green, the green man, all these mysterious appearances throughout time. That is the essence of what the green man or the blue green man, it's blue green algae. It represents life, biological life. Okay. And two people don't like it. God wants to kill us and the devil wants us dead. We're stuck in between. We're like Jesus hanging on the cross, the strong ass between two burdens. Don't want to get into it. We've already covered it. But the blue-green shows itself in the Haby lines, Haby lines of the element hydrogen. And there's divisions of light spectra within the hydrogen spectra. And that is rose red light, which is found all throughout the universe. And I've covered that in a previous episode. And rose red light is the most prevalent light there is out in space. And that the nanometer value of that light is 656.3, which is very close to 666. So there's another, and they're in the Balmer spectrum. Okay, there's the Lyman, Balmer, Fund, and one else. Can't think of what it is. But anyway, in the Balmer section, you'll find that 6563, but you'll also find the 486.1. Okay, and that is a blue-green spectrum of light. And when you read about Rahab the harlot, Reuben, Jacob's eldest, they're connected to that 486.1 Balmer spectra of the hydrogen spectrum. So, and that theme comes up over and over again in the Bible, and it's in the movie, in The Matrix. So, and it's also connected to the fine structure constant of the universe. We've already covered that in a previous episode. So, I could get into real interesting things concerning the FSC. One is Father, Son, and Spirit. So, fine is fluorine, Father is stone, and that's lithium, and Spirit. So FSC each hold a Father, Son, and Spirit value to them. And don't ever lose track of the fact that there's two spirits found in the Bible. There's a lying spirit and then there's the Holy Spirit. So you always have to make sure, like when King Saul was having his massive migraine headaches, his soothsayers were saying, oh, it's an evil spirit from the Lord. No, it wasn't. That's not of God. When you're going through those hard times and God has cut you off, I call it getting the Nebuchadnezzar treatment from God. You're in a bad way, and you're on death's doorstep, and it ain't looking good for you. And I've been there. That is not the good spirit from God. Trust me. His advisors were advising him wrong. Saul had crossed a line with God, and God was done with him. So anyway, Samuel. But Lucifer, being the covering cherub, represents the two cherub that were touching wings over the Ark of the Covenant, who represent Adam and Eve. But and the 1 and the 0. But anyway, the covering cherub is also what we call the Great Pyramid. Okay, and that covered the geyser underneath, and the geyser it's a steam geyser. And what is that? It's hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. So a lot of Luciferians say, oh, see, the Great Pyramid's God. No. God is identifying with the geyser. And that's why Adam, it literally is a dam. Adam is a dam All those stones stacked up over that geyser served as a dam. Okay, and that's another meaning behind the name Adam. Okay, so when they tell you, oh, the Great Pyramid, see that hydrogen is God, Jesus is the devil, they're wrong, and they haven't sliced up the fine minutia of the Word of God. If they had done that, they wouldn't be saying the things that they say, because what they're saying is doctrinally wrong. When you slice it up into the fine structure, you begin to see the minutia and you go, oh, that's what that is? Yes. Bang, could have had a V8. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up. And I'll leave episode 1 of the Matrix explaining the my opinion, my professional opinion, the storyline behind the Matrix. And we'll leave it at that. And thank you for tuning in. All right, so thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the links below. And thank you for tuning in.